Hey, what's up everybody, Nexel here. Today we are playing Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, and I want to discuss my strategy of how I beat the Saix XIII event. So without further ado, let's hop right in, and I'll talk about my equipment as well as small things you can do in order to increase the damage to help you get up there. So this was the setup that I used, and we will go through the medals pretty much one by one here, starting with our Illustrated Kyrie EX. Super important medal for the strategy because it buffs everything. It does PSM buffing, general buffing, upright strength buffing, and then it also does PSM debuffing for the enemy, general defense down for the enemy, and then it also heals you, heals your SP, and also adds 1 gauge to the enemy's counters, which is super important for the strategy that we have to use here. This part is where it gets kind of dicey because unfortunately I know not a lot of people may have extra attack on a copy medal. I don't know if you can get away without it. I want to say that you can just by tweaking a few things here and there. But the importance of this copy medal was to finish wrapping up my buffs, to increase the enemy's counter, and to essentially like get myself set up for the pretty much damaging at this point on that we're going to have to do in order to defeat Saix. We move on to a Prime KHUX 17 that has Attack Boost 5 max and no traits on it, followed by a Prime Illustrated Axle, again Attack Boost 6 max, SP Gauge 1 with no traits on it, and then into another dicier part of the strategy where we have an HD Antiform Sora with extra attack. So that's kind of strange, and it's kind of hard to say like, hey, here's my strategy, hope you can follow it, when this is a pretty key element in my opinion, but it may not be as key as I want to say it is. So I'll show you why once we get towards actually defeating Saix, why I feel like you can get away without having extra attack on HD Antiform Sora. We follow it up with a 7-star Final Fantasy Record Keeper Warrior of Light. Again, I know kind of a weird thing to have like a strategy and have this in there, because only like 5,000 players in the entire game have Final Fantasy Record Keeper Warrior of Light. But the importance of these last 2 medals was essentially to make the enemy's counters work with math that I want them to work with. So the +6 counters that I got from this became super important. So maybe you can get away with it if you have the HD Antiform Sora and then a 7-star Lexaeus Plus. I haven't tested that strategy because I don't have a 7-star Lexaeus Plus, but maybe it works there. We wrap things up with a Prime KHUX 17 friend medal that has aerial, ground, and extra attack on it. Super important for this strategy because again, we need to work the numbers so that they work out in our favor for the strategy that we're going to use. Before we hop in, just know that there are a few extra things that you can do in order to increase your damage. So the first thing that you can do to increase your damage, in case you haven't done it already, is to upgrade your sub slots. So I've tried this strategy I've tried this strategy without sub slots, and it actually doesn't work. So the sub slots make a big difference in terms of damage, especially when it increases the multiplier of everything. It increases the multiplier of the pet slot as well as every single slot on your Keyblade. So that becomes super important for damage fixing, and know that it's an extra means of squeezing out that extra damage, hopefully getting you to where you need to be. The other thing that you can do right now, and it's kind of a stretch to say because some people don't really have access to it, is to make sure you use your boosters. Now, while the Prime 7-star booster isn't exactly available to everyone, there is a booster that is currently out that is available to everyone. So, if you haven't done so already, go ahead, hop into Union Cross, and at the very least, if you're using Lexaeus Plus, make sure you do this board because it's super important to, again, increase that extra damage and just try and squeeze out as much as you possibly can out of the medals that you're using. Especially since for a lot of people, Lexaeus Plus 7-star might be the big damage dealing medal that they're using if they couldn't get their hands on like Final Fantasy Record Keeper Warrior of Light. So keep that in mind. That's just 2 extra means of increasing your damage output that are more feasible than certain things like Final Fantasy Record Keeper Warrior of Light. Alright, let's go ahead, head into the event, and then we will do a quick breakdown of how my strategy works here. So for those that haven't been playing the game too long or that just aren't aware of this strategy yet, it's this kind of strategy that revolves around your buffs and then a counter. And it's not a glitch because it's a built into the mechanic of the game that you're able to pretty much use to your advantage. So we start off here by increasing Saix's counters, And it's very important to pay attention to the blue one because that's what this strategy is going to revolve around, the blue counters. So we used pretty much all our buffs. We have almost max buffs, and then the enemy almost has max debuffs minus the upright debuff, and then I believe I'm missing one upright debuff there too. So that's going to get corrected here with the Prime Key Art 17. Now after this Prime Key Art 17, as you can see, there's only -4 defense debuff, upright defense debuff on all the enemies right now. But that gets fixed with the strategy that we're using here. So at this point, we're just going to be busting down Saix, trying to deal as much damage as possible. And this is one of the means where I said it's important to keep track of the counters, because now Saix is at a hit counter, which is the blue counter, of 1, and that means if I hit him with anything that is not going to increase his counter, he's going to come swinging at me next turn. So that was the importance of this HD Antiform Sora with extra attack, and then the Warrior of Light, is to increase that counter so that I can keep hitting him, while at the same time not getting hit myself. So we keep attacking him here, and then we should end up with a blue counter of 7. Now that becomes important for this very last medal, because in order for this strategy to work, you need to be knocked out with the revenge counter. I almost said a no-no word for this game. You need to be knocked out by the revenge counter, and that's why it's important that this Key Art 17 has extra attack on it, because it does 4 hits. So these first 4 hits are going to drop me down to 3 on the blue counter, and then the next 4 hits is going to drop it so that he does his revenge attack. So here we are, he's going to do the revenge attack, and it's going to completely knock me out because there's no way to survive from this one. So here we are getting hit by pretty much like 5 million points of damage, and then we get the HP recovery 1. So after that, his counters go back up to 8, the blue counters go back up to 8, and all the enemies retain their debuffs, and I retain my buffs. That's the important part about getting knocked out while your medals are still in rotation and before it hits the enemy turn, because if you get knocked out and you revive, your setup goes back to the very beginning and you maintain all the buffs and debuffs on the field. So at this point, I can let the game autoplay itself, and it's going to knock out Saix at this rate. So again, I get it up to 11, which is going to be important because Key Art 17 is going to take away 4, and then Axel's going to take away 6, bringing him down to 1. I bring him back up to a level where I can use both attacks on Key Art 17, and that's the strategy. It's important that I did it so that the math works, so that I maintain my buffs and the enemy maintains their debuffs. Otherwise, I'd be cranking out less damage with each successive turn. So that was my strategy to beat this guy, and we're just going to play it out so that you can see exactly how my strategy worked out for me. Again, the only medals with really impressive traits were the 2 copy medals with extra attack, which again I know is kind of an iffy point. But once we get to the end, I'll tell you why I think it might not be necessary to have extra attack on that HD Antiform Sora. So this is the last turn. We're following the strategy pretty much just as directed, and we are going to get his counters down more when we hop into our attacking medals here. Alright, so we transition into HD Antiform Sora, and let's take a look at the damage that this thing does. Alright, so we're there, we do one more attack, and that should be enough to take him out there. Okay, it's almost enough to take him out there. Know that you still have access to your Nova to deal some extra damage, and there you go. So that's the strategy, and as you can see, I barely tipped my way until those last 3 attacks, so I didn't need the Friend Metal extra attack. I almost didn't need that extra Warrior of Light attack, so maybe it's plausible to do it without that little bit of extra damage squeezing out. But again, this is all just strategies and options. I'm really just hoping that it's helpful to some people to kind of just finish up this quest, or at least get as many jewels out of this event as humanly possible. Alright, well that is it for now. That is how I beat the new Saix 13 event. If there are any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to drop them down in the comments below, and I would be happy to try my best to answer them. But as always, everyone, until the next video, take it easy. Let's actually get out of this because I feel like I don't want to end the video on this. Alright, we're going to hop into the 13 event, and there you go. Alright, as always, everyone, until the next time, take it easy.